Hi, my name is Deneen Matsuda. I teach 4th grade and welcome to my channel. My channel is a place where we learn together how to teach literacy and math in more engaging hands-on ways. Today is a literacy video called a gap scene, and what it is a comprehension activity that your students will love, and it really helps them with their metacognition, thinking about their thinking. It requires no prep except to teach them how it's done. So a gap scene is something that happens in like when you jump from one topic to another, from one area in the story to another, and a gap is left. And I first introduced it with a Little House on the Prairie episode, where Ma is home she's sick, she's near death's door. Pa finds out that something is wrong and goes speeding down to Walnut Grove to find her and busts into the house and finds her on the ground. And then there's a huge gap because the next scene you see is Doc Baker is there, Reverend Alden is there, the girls are there, and we're left with, well, how did that all happen? So then I took time to explain, what is a gap? That wasn't a word they were familiar with, but they're all losing their teeth right now. So that was a really good place for me to explain what a gap is. It's a space. And then we moved into some examples in stories that we're reading, where we're in one area and then all of a sudden we move to another area. And then what the students do is they fill in the gap. They find a place in their reading where they think a gap would occur and then write what happens in that space. And that can look like a paragraph. Kate wrote she wrote 2 pages for her gap scene. Other students like Kiara were making pictures with words, like a cartoon in blocks. It doesn't matter how they do it as long as they convey what is happening. And my students made such interesting observations, and I wanted to share them with you because if I had had them doing a basic comprehension page with questions and answers, they would not have made these kinds of connections. Let me give you an example. Catherine said, "Oh, wait a minute. Every book starts with a gap scene." And I honestly had never thought of that. Yes, the character is 12 years old. What happened in that 12-year time? So yes, every book does start with a gap scene. And then Fletcher said, "Well, the Bible doesn't. It starts with in the beginning." And I said, "Well, does it? Because what happened before the beginning? God was here. He was alive, right? He was doing things. There's even a gap scene there, pre-beginning." Jordan made the observation, gap scenes are really necessary. True. Imagine if there were no gap scenes. It would take us years to complete one book. So yes, gap scenes are necessary. They have to keep the story moving along. What else did they say? Kiara and Kate both had gap scenes in their gap scene. Kiara, I remember she wrote 5 hours later and then continued on. And then what made me so happy was the students started connecting it through the day. Ella, we were doing our read aloud by the Great Horn Spoon, and she said, "That's a gap scene." And I'll hear students throughout the day saying, "That's a gap scene. Oh, that's a gap scene." Would I ever have them talking about a reading comprehension page? And no. And is there value in this? Yes, because it's forcing them to think about what's going on in the story and write something that would make sense. And I can't help but believe that this is going to help them with their reading comprehension when they come across their MAP testing here very soon, their standardized tests. We want them to be thinking about what they're reading and help them to stop just reading without thinking, just word calling. We want them to stop and make gap scenes as they read. And I only had them do one gap scene in the whole week. And, that kept them occupied reading and doing a gap scene. So give it a try and let me know how it goes. I would love to hear from you and see how your gap scenes go. Goodbye. I'm Deneen Matsuda. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget
to like and subscribe!